Hello and welcome to Keep Right On, the Birmingham City podcast brought to you from us here at Birmingham Live. I'm Brian Dick and I'm joined as ever by my colleague and co-host Alex Dicken, fresh-faced from last night's 2-0 victory over Leyton Orient and looking ahead to what I suppose is arguably the tallest hurdle left remaining on Blues running, the top two game against Wycombe on Saturday. Alex, how you doing?
Very good, Brian. Yeah, I actually feel quite fresh after a midweek game, which is rare for me. But it was relatively straightforward last night, wasn't it, for Blues? Once the red card happened in 12th minute, there was never really any doubt that Blues were going to win the game, and so it proved.
Yeah, fresh presumably because it's a home game. That always helps, and you're not schlepping to somewhere down in the southeast and for a 2 a.m. return. And obviously the result helps as well. You mentioned the red card. Now, it's probably not the sort of the abiding thing that happened last night, is it? But it really did shape the game, didn't it? Because it looked to me like Leyton Orient were having a decent go against Blues, as they did in the home match back in August.
Yeah, I mean, they set up, to match Blues, didn't they, in a 4-2-3, which is rare in itself because most teams do come to St Andrews and set up with a 5 at the back. And they were the best team I saw in August. And, given their form, I expected it to be a really tough match of Blues, potentially even tougher than the Wycombe game on Saturday would have been. But, the game just changed and it's 12 minutes in when the red card happened. It's a contentious one, isn't it? Both managers disagreed on the call. You can see it from both sides because the follow-through, he does go through Iwata with the studs up. However, you would say Curry did get the ball and how it's a natural movement of his foot then to come up, isn't it? And for the studs to catch Iwata. So it's a very difficult one. Referees in this league have been battered by Blues fans the time this season and myself, but I probably sympathise with him a little bit on that one. It was a tough call. But yeah, once that happened, Leyton Orient went into a 5-3-1. They took off their top scorer, Charlie Kelman, and brought on kind of more athletic players to get up and down the pitch, but they never really got up and down. It was more of a kind of damage limitation exercise and keeping the score down, and they did that quite effectively until the final minutes where Blues obviously made the game safe with the second goal.
Yeah, I know managers always see things through their own coloured tinted glasses, don't they? But Chris Davis was really emphatic that it was a red card, and Richie Wellens was as emphatic, and the other sort of polar opposite, wasn't it? To me, it was a yellow and a half. You can understand why it's been given as a red, but I wouldn't necessarily have been surprised had it only been a yellow. It was in the middle for me, but what is undisputed is, as you say, the tactical alteration that changed the whole game pattern, didn't it, from there? Yeah,
exactly. And, it'd been interesting to get the two managers together, wouldn't it? And kind of get them to talk it out away from the media and the
imagine that. Yeah,
well, it would have been very good. Like you say, Brian, it probably was a yellow and a half. Chris Davis probably wouldn't have been so in favour already if that was against one of his players, I would say.
Yeah, just thinking about the two managers you'd love to be a fly on the wall in when they got together. Anyone and Steve Evans, any Blues manager and Steve Evans, any Blues manager and Neil Warnock. There'd be some real good ones, wouldn't there, if you could do that?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, I'd love to have been a fly on the wall in the Nathan Jones, Chris Davies meeting earlier in the season as well. I don't know if they still actually happen, whether the managers do actually have a glass of wine or whatever after games these days. They're probably all kind of too fixated by going and researching the next opponent before their commitments with that game have even finished. So yeah, I don't know, but they feel like two really contrasting personalities, Davies and Wellens, and probably would have clashed on the touchline at times last night when Wellens did actually go down because he started up and then went down, didn't he, after the goal? Which is quite strange. I've not seen that before, but yeah, he was very vociferous on the sidelines, wasn't
he? Indeed. I think for me, the one sort of player or personality that did catch the eye last night was Ethan Laird, who, fair to say, he could have had a hat-trick and an assist or a one penalty as well. He had his man absolutely beaten all ends up, didn't he?
Well, yeah, he had both of his men absolutely beaten all ends up because obviously the first guy he was playing against got sent off, didn't he? So this replacement didn't fare too well against Laird either. And like you say about the penalty, I think that probably should and would have been a penalty had Blues not scored. The referee was kind of umming and ahhing over it a little bit, wasn't he? He looked like he was probably about to give it, maybe because of the pressure coming from behind the goal in the Tilton. Laird had a great chance very early on, didn't he? Where he's doing excellently with the press, and the ball's dropped to him 8 yards out, and he's lashed it wide. Probably should have scored, to be fair, but took his goal so well, and that was a really good move actually to finish the game. And a lovely pass from Chris Clara as well, which we haven't seen too much of that from him this season, stepping into their final third, defensive third, and picking out a pass like that, and obviously a great run and finish from Laird.
Yeah, the space between the central defender and, is it Jaden Sweeney, I think, the left back. You could have driven a bus through that space, and it wasn't the hardest pass to play. But Laird saw it. Laird was pointing where he wanted the ball, wasn't he? So he saw the picture in his mind. And as you say, it was a really good finish. You expect in that situation either a player to go, if they're going to go to the near post, they absolutely lash it, or they play a cross goal. But he just sort of fed it under the goalkeeper, which is a really, really composed finish. And Chris Davis, I think, spoke about him afterwards, and certainly he did to Blues TV, just saying what a contribution he's making. And I know you've written about him quite a lot as well. And I know he became the poster boy for us, or for me potentially, with last season's frustration that the squad just didn't get it. But this season, so this year, I would say, let's change it to the start of 2025. I think he's probably been Blues' best player. And Leyton Orient just looked overmatched with an athlete of Laird's quality last night, I thought.
Yeah, we've said numerous times that in terms of an athlete, he's Premier League quality, isn't he? And the way he just kind of saw that space inside the fullback and burst into it. There aren't many players with that kind of speed off the mark to get into that position. But yeah, like you said, Brian, he's been outstanding since the turn of the year. 15 games he's played, 3 goals, 3 assists, and he also won that penalty against Cambridge. So, he's pretty much averaging a goal or assist every 2 games. So that's outstanding for a fullback at this level. And he looks like the top end championship right back we thought he was going to be when he first joined Blues at the moment. And it will be interesting to see how he gets on when he gets back into that league.
And indeed, something he said to you post-match was that he's learnt about his body. I'm not sure if that was the exact quote, but he understands his body more and what he needs to do to stay fit, which really, other than has been the main knock on him, hasn't it? His availability. So yeah, I thought that was really quite telling when you reported that. Yeah,
he's mentioned that a couple of times actually, in that. He hasn't had a muscular injury this season. I spoke to Chris Davis about it recently, and he basically said how hard Laird has been working, not just in doing all the recovery aspects they've put in place this season, but also in terms of his diet and looking after himself. So fair play to Laird, because he has only had that one ankle injury this season, hasn't he? Which was caused by a challenge. So he's having an exceptional season, really, when you think about it. And since the start of this calendar year, he's probably thrown his name into the player of the season conversation as well.
Yeah, I think he probably has. Yeah. The other player we wanted to talk about was poor Alfie May.
I feel too sorry for him.
No. To be fair, again, another player that should, maybe not should have had a hat trick last night. But just reflect on his performance, because they were going in at the start of the season and they're not going in now.
Yeah, I mean, the numbers surrounding May's season are quite extraordinary, really, when you think that he scored in his first 4 league games 4 goals. He's only scored in 4 league games since August. Obviously, that coincides with the arrival of Jay Stansfield, the change of position for Alfie May initially, and moving into that 10 role where he didn't play that well, he didn't fare that well. Certainly his numbers weren't very good while he played there. Was moved back into the striker position, had that little goal glut around New Year where he scored 3 and 2 against Stockport, and then Wigan. And we all thought at that point that it was time for Alfie May to kick on. He mentioned after that game against Wigan that he wanted to win the Golden Boot, he wanted to retain it, but he didn't quite carry on that form. And then naturally Jay Stansfield's form dipped as well. So then the conversation becomes, how can we get the best out of Jay Stansfield? Because ultimately he is the talisman of this Blues side. So Chris Davies moves him back into the centre forward position, and lo and behold, he scores 6 in 6 games. So Alfie Mayer's, paid the price for Chris Davies wanting to get the best out of his best player. And he's come back into the team on the back of injuries on a run, which probably through little fault of his own because he's not been playing all the time, but he's on a run of, 11 games without a goal now, which is his worst run in front of goal in 5 years. And he does look like a player who's lacking confidence, which I didn't think I'd say at the start of the season when he was plundering goals in. But the chances that came to him against Leyton Orient, the first, I actually didn't think was an awful finish in that he lifted it over the goalkeeper and it's just come back off the crossbar. It was just unfortunate.
I agree.
Just unfortunate. The second one was the chance for me because he's taken it down really well from a lovely pass by Tomoki Iwata, and he's probably got to finish that, hasn't he? The goalkeeper's trained legs kept it out. And to be fair to Josh Keeley, he did get out very quickly to May, but he's probably taken a second too long to think about it, which strikers do when they're in bad runs of form, and it hasn't gone in. And you could see his frustration, not just after that chance, but also when he came off late on. And you could see that frustration actually at Reading at the weekend because he looked absolutely desperate to score against Reading when he came off the bench. And again, the ball just didn't quite fall for him. So I'm sure it'll change because the chances are coming for him, but Blues do probably need it to change sooner rather than later because obviously of the striker shortage at the moment.
Yeah, I'm concerned, but not massively, if you know what I mean. As you said, the first chance, he's lifted it over the goalkeeper and, he's just lifted it too high. Had he been 2 inches closer to goal, it probably would have skimmed off the underside of the bar and gone in. The miss that you referred to, or the save that Keeley pulled off, the first touch is excellent. The movement to find the space between the defenders is very good. The first touch is excellent. There's a little second touch in there as well, which gets it into a shooting position. Just think potentially the shot is a little bit, using Richard Wilford's word here, a little bit polite. Maybe he needs to be a bit more assertive with that. But if you're thinking touch, and heaven knows we've criticised him for his touch at times this season, haven't we? I thought that his touch has been okay, and he is still getting those chances. And I do think it is a classic cliched case of when one goes in, the confidence will come flooding back, and he'll probably go on a run then. So not massively concerned. I think it might be helpful to him, although certainly not to Blues, the fact that he probably knows he's going to be starting most games now. And yes, with that comes pressure, but also he hasn't got to be looking over his shoulder. Does he? He's going to be the main man for the next 5, 6, 7, 8, however many games it is before Jay gets back. So
sorry, bro, that's a great point because you think back to the start of the season when he was playing his best football, not just in terms of scoring goals, but also his link play and everything else. It was when he knew he was going to play and he knew he was the main man.
Yeah, indeed. Other options. So where are we with the sort of the fitness trajectories of Stansfield and Dykes, Alex?
Yeah, so Stansfield, not had an update from Chris Davies from about a week ago, basically, where before the Reading game, he said he's not going to be a few days, but he's not going to be months. So, in Chris Davies speak, is that maybe a few weeks, 2 or 3 weeks? I think it's a weird injury. So, it's obviously come with Stansfield from the contact of the defender onto the back of his leg, which is why they were quite concerned about the femur initially because of the pain. So it's clearly, a really heavy, deep-rooted injury behind, the bone of his leg. So it's when, that really does settle down. And I'm told he's been going to hospital for treatment there as well. So they're trying to do it obviously as quickly as possible and get it settled down. Chris Davies said it comes down to how quick a healer Jay Stansfield is. And obviously we know he's quite a quick healer from previous injuries that he's had. So hopefully, he only misses 3 or 4 games. We'll get an update on Friday. I'm not sure he's going to be back for the Wycombe game, but, you'd look latter half next week and hopefully maybe, the outlook is a little bit better. But again, I think because if it's the type of injury it's a case of kind of waiting for it to calm down and settle down a bit. Dykes, obviously, losing him is a massive blow on the back of it, because he would have probably dovetailed with May and switched roles from starting and on the bench for the remaining games with Stansfield out, and to get an injury probably because of a bad pitch is very, very frustrating. And the same said for Scott Wright. The pitch at Reading was terrible, and to be fair to Reading manager Noel Hunt, he said afterwards that he'd warned or he'd advised that they sort the pitch out, and said that it could cause an injury to a player. But Reading's financial situation means they can't afford to pay the bill to light the pitch and grow the grass, and it's really cost Blues with two proper injuries, one which rules right out of the rest of the season, one which rules Lyndon Dykes out for the majority of the remaining games.
Which leaves Lucas Djukovic and Alfie May as the last two men standing. Saw Ben Hawker from Blues Breakdown tweet yesterday that Djukovic has now, after last night's substitute appearance, played more games than Koji Miyoshi for Blues this season. Obviously, Miyoshi didn't see out the transfer window. What did you make of Duke last night, and how extensively do you think he'll get used?
So he really put himself about, didn't he? I think first involvement, ball comes in from the left side, and he's thrown his head at the defender's foot to try and get a contact on it. And the great thing about Djukovic is he does throw himself at crosses, which has been a criticism from me of other Blues forwards. Dykes at times this season, and Willemsen will come on to him. Djukovic does give you that aerial threat, and I always felt he was going to come on quite early last night because of the way the game panned out, with Orient sitting very deep, inviting Blues to cross from wide areas, and Blues were largely ineffective when they did that. So he was okay. He put himself about a bit as well, showed that he can press, and he actually showed that he's not as slow as people probably think he is. There was a little decent turn of pace at one stage, and we know Lucas Djukovic is one player will give his all and will be an asset for Blues until the end of his contract. And Dykes being out potentially means Djukovic gets a spot on the bench at Wembley, I think, as well. So maybe his Blues story will get a more fitting ending than it would have if he'd left at the end of last season.
That is the storyline, isn't it? The Duke winner off the bench, although hopefully it'll be settled by then. Do Blues need to change the way they press, or indeed press at all, if Duke is on the pitch?
You might need more mobility in the three positions behind him, which could be an issue because obviously Scott Wright and Keshi Anderson are probably the two most mobile players who play in those positions, and they're out injured, aren't they, at the moment? So, if you've got Djukovic up top, Dal, Willemsen, and the left wing is a real conversation at the moment. TGH probably is going to have to play that position. Obviously, he's an absolute workhorse. Dal puts himself about a bit. Willemsen, maybe not as good at pressing as some of the others. But it's difficult. I do feel like Djukovic is going to be an option off the bench. I don't see him starting games. Actually,
I thought Duke had a good chance last night when Hansen put the ball in. I expected him to do better with that headed chance. Listen, he is an option, isn't he? And I think we've said this season that there's been times when you just want Blues to get the ball in the box if they're chasing a late goal, and someone like Djukovic would potentially be the best person to get on the end of it. 8 substitute appearances so far this season. Yeah, hopefully there's a couple more goals in the old warhorse yet. Inevitably, what you do in this situation as well is you look inward, or you look down into the academy and see, is there anyone knocking on the door there? Frank Tatum has scored plenty of goals for the 21s, hasn't he, recently? Where's he at, and how, in terms of, could he just be airdropped into the first team or onto the bench?
Yeah, this is the thing, because, when you're looking for kind of a mobile striker who can press in the way that Chris Davies wants, young, fresh legs like Frank Tatum probably would come in handy. 6 goals his last 9 starts for the 21s, has been the main goal getter for them this season after stepping up from the 18s, doing really well the 18s. That successful under-18 side last season. Did okay in pre-season training, and then obviously was very unfortunate before that first friendly to get an injury which ruled him out for a few months. But he's come back and done really well. Has also trained with the first team recently, so quite in tune with what Chris Davies would want. He's in contention for an FA Cup outing on the bench actually in January, when Chris Davies called up a couple of youngsters last minute. So it'll be interesting to see, if Chris Davies does look to the 21s at some point and does look to the academy, because there are players down there. Obviously, Tatum is probably the main one you would look at, along with Said Biteka. He's probably more of a winger than a striker, but yeah, he's certainly got a chance and has trained with the first team on occasion. So Chris Davies will be aware of him.
Yeah, indeed. I wonder if in the world where there's no injuries, you're potentially saying, well, the next step for Frank Tatum would be to go out and on loan and get a youth loan and some senior football that way. I wonder if Blues are looking at that, and if they are, whether they're still thinking that might be the best course of action. The other player that I suppose is down there is Curtis Havenhand, who joined from Sheffield United, but as we understand it, I think he's still on his way back and needs to regain fitness from a long-term injury, right? Yeah,
definitely. To be fair, he did score, I think, on his debut for them, a consolation in a 4-1 defeat. But I would expect him to be with the 21s and working on his fitness at the end of the season, and then obviously going for the 21s next season. Frank Tatum, because of his goal record and his fitness, would probably be ahead of him for me.
Yeah, indeed. And I've had this conversation with many people many times. It's decades since Blues have produced a homegrown striker, and not many have even got close. Josh Andrews is probably the last one that did well at 21's level and has gone into have a bit of a senior career, but not really got close to Blues. There was Kyle McFarlane, who scored a lot of goals in the 21s, wasn't there, for a while? And he didn't catch. I don't think he ever made an appearance for the Blues first team. And I think you're almost going back to someone like Andy Johnson, in the early 2000s. And you can then quibble about whether Andy Johnson was homegrown, but it would certainly be a fantastic find if someone like Frank could come through and use the old Reach favourite headline, "Save the club millions," wouldn't it? It'd be really good. So we've also got some takes and some questions from fans. So thank you for submitting those. The take from Blue Nose Cypher. I'm shocked at how much Chris Davies has been overlooked by anyone outside the club this season. His first managerial role, and he's well on course for a record-breaking points haul, unbeaten in the league for 3 months, and a trip to Wembley. Dream start to his career. Are you shocked, Alex, that he hasn't been connected with other management positions? Because there's been plenty of them in the Championship.
Not necessarily in the Championship. I feel like he probably would see they wouldn't bother asking the question because he sees the project with Blues. He didn't join just to win League One, did he? He joined to have a crack at the Championship too. So maybe not shocked that Championship clubs haven't asked the question. I'm shocked that just in general he hasn't probably got more praise from the wider footballing world. I know League One isn't right at the top of the agenda for national newspapers and media outlets, but Chris Davies has done an exceptional job. When you think about this season, he could probably only fail in that he had to win the league, and Blues are well on course to do that. And not only are they on course to do that, they're on course to shatter the League One points record of Wolves from 2013-14, and they could also break Reading's EFL points record as well of 106 from the 06-07 season, I believe. So, Blues are tracking for 108 points at the moment. It's ridiculous that he's kind of created this absolute juggernaut in League One. Yes, it's in League One. Yes, he's got exceptional players, but teams have been in this level before with equally good teams and have not, achieved this level of winning. So that's why he deserves such great credit for me. He's done a really good job. Again, he's going to be tested further when Blues get to the Championship and they're with teams of comparable budgets. But he's done all that could be expected of him this season and probably a little bit more.
Yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head there. He's probably victim of to the assumption from everybody that, well, you've had millions and millions to put into this squad. League One should be shooting fish in a barrel. And in a way, it has been a little bit like that. Leyton Orient last night, a real form team, and Blues absolutely handled them, didn't they? And every time Blues come to what we're describing as a difficult moment in their season, where they've got back-to-back games against the top 8. I think 4 of the on a run of 4 fixtures now against teams either in the playoffs or, in Wycombe's case, in the promotion position or knocking on the door, that top 8, top 10. And Blues are just grinding out the win still. So he's just not getting credit for that. I think that's reflected in the fact he must have really upset the Manager of the Month panel. Has he won it yet this season?
No, so he's been nominated 4 times and he's not won 4 times. So Phil Parkinson beat him, Steve Bruce beat him that was in August and September.
Wellens has beaten him, hasn't he? Yeah.
Richie Wellens has beaten him the last 2 months, and you probably can't actually argue with it on each occasion. It's just Chris Davies might actually get to the end of the season, not win a Manager of the Month award, but win the Manager of the Season award. Just because of the sheer volume of victories that Blues are racking up. But for whatever reason, in each month, there's been someone who's done slightly better.
And it is a classic case of, to whom much is given, from whom much is expected, isn't it? So, But that doesn't necessarily mean to say that, anyone, you or I, could have gone and sorted out, this current Blues squad into a cogent title-winning machine. He does deserve credit for that. As you say, I don't think he moves to another Championship club because this is where Blues are going, and it'll be a matter of weeks anyway. And I don't know that a Premier League club looks at someone like Chris at this point in his career and says, "Oh, you're doing well. The League One's strongest squad. You're the man for us." So I'm not shocked to sort of comment on that take a little bit. We do have some questions. I like this one from Brandon. He's put this really well. Why does Thor identify as 5'4" when heading a football? And you sent me something similar last night, didn't you? Not those words, but you were. I think Thor had missed that header in the first half, hadn't he? A free header, and it looped limply wide. Thoughts about Thor and his aerial prowess?
He's. I mean, for all of his talent on the floor, he's bad in the air, isn't he? I think this season he's had probably 6, 7 like gilt-edged headed chances, and he's missed them. And for someone of his size, 6'4", the physique he's got, he should really just be battering people over in the box, shouldn't he, and powering these headers home. And he always just seems, like you said earlier, when about Alfie May's shot. Thor just seems polite when he gets into those positions. He doesn't seem to really want to score those goals. He had one after that headed chance, the first one, another one that kind of came in from across from the left, and he's got there first, and he's probably 6 yards out, and he's somehow managed to head it backwards. I don't know that it's just a technical fault that he's just not particularly good in the air, but he could have had 6 or 7 extra goals this season if he could head a ball.
Yeah, I spotted this in November actually, the 2-0 victory away at Exeter. And I spoke to when Thor had 2 free headers. I think they were both put in by Alex Cochrane in the first half. Absolutely on a plate. And, again, I think the goalkeeper might have saved them. And I put this to Chris Davies after the game. Thor got to do better in those situations. And he looked at me as though I'd committed a cardinal sin, because I think Thor was playing extremely well at that time. But Nikola Zigic wasn't great in the air, to be honest with you, either. He was even taller, and as someone who's unnecessarily tall, I can identify with not being good at heading the ball as well. But Blues fans have probably got every right to expect something more from someone like an Iceland international. Doesn't necessarily go that because you're tall that you're great in the air, but as you say, he probably could be on 10 goals now, couldn't he? With just a bit more assertiveness in that position.
I don't know whether he has to be good in the air for the chances that he's had, Brian. There've been loads of players down the years who've not been good in the air, but they've managed to score pretty simple headed chances. I'm not saying either of the headed chances he had against Leyton Orient was simple. The first one was actually quite far out. You would have expected him to hit the target there. The second one, I think, was probably a better chance, but he just didn't get his header right, and obviously somehow managed to head it backwards. But some of the ones this season, there was one over Christmas. It might have been against Blackpool near the end, where he's right under the crossbar, and he's met it, and he's just not made the right connection. He should really be scoring those chances. We criticise other players in the same way if they miss those chances, and they aren't all 6'4". So it's just a frustration. It's a frustration that you kind of, when they signed him as a number 10. you see all these technical qualities he's got and see the size of him and think, oh, he's a very, very different number 10. But actually, he's somebody who just wants to play like a number 10 and play with the ball at his feet all the time. He doesn't want to have that kind of... He's got these great physical attributes, but doesn't use them, to set himself apart from other number 10s of his type.
Yeah, indeed. Simon Mellor sort of widens out the discussion about Thor. Willem Willemsen's current form and his long-term future. Is he a slow burn, and is he capable of contributing in the Championship? I liked a phrase you used before we came on, and I'm going to out you for using it.
Oh no!
It's almost like you said. It's almost like Thor got to October and felt like he'd completed League One. Thor in the Championship. There's no reason to suspect that he's not going to be a very good player in the Championship, is there?
No, and Chris Davies did actually kind of allude to this in a press conference recently. I can't remember who I was talking about. It was about Stansfield, I think, and going up the levels and kind of getting better as you go up the levels. Because these players, a lot of these Blues players have got better ability than League One. And he actually kind of just name-checked Thor, saying that maybe someone like him, when he goes up and the quality of football is better, will feel naturally more comfortable in playing that way, and it will come more naturally to him rather than kind of the physical end-to-end battle of League One games. So that's clearly an interesting insight into his thinking about Thor. And I just feel that between September and November, he was exceptional. When you think of the goals he was scoring, the assists he was providing, wasn't the three? There was a hat-trick of assists in one game against Fulham's kids, weren't there? So maybe it just kind of all got too easy for him. And we just haven't seen the best of him in the last 2 or 3 months. There have obviously been injuries and illness in there as well, which have derailed him a little bit. But he's such a good player, and we've seen that he's such a good player that we just want to see it more often. I'm not questioning whether he's going to be involved in the Championship next season. He's part of the spine of the Blues team that I think will be very good in the Championship. But you can't afford for him to have 2 months of this kind of form in the Championship. Blues won't be able to carry him at that point. He'll need to deliver more frequently.
Yeah, indeed. Let's move on. I'm going to combine a couple of questions here. Jay Taylor and Mr. Lean 1999 too. Basically talking
I'll see what you've done there, Brian.
Talking about, thank you. Basically talking about the wide areas. Jay's asked concerns with the wide areas. Keshi carrying a knock. Hansen up until now not able to stay healthy. Dal can play there, but the form of Willem Willemsen leaves me wanting him in the 10. That leaves you with makeshift wide players such as Gardner Hickman and Luke Harris. Lee has asked, with the injury crisis, is it time to get a free agent or two involved? And that's also a suggestion that Jay's put. Free agency, Alex, or the other name thrown into the mix is Benteke. So Benteke as well. Any thoughts about that? Benteke has been on the bench, hasn't he? I think.
Yeah, he came on in the cup game. I'd be very surprised. Right, yeah. I'd be surprised at that one, to be honest. The wide areas. It's an interesting one because Chris Davies obviously let Yokoyama go and join Young Genk in January, didn't he? So he kind of rid himself of one extra wide option. So now he's probably only got 3 natural wingers. He's got Kieran Dal, who he does like to use off the right. He's got Willemsen, who can occasionally play off the right. He's got Luke Harris as a 10, who can play off the left or right if needs be. Wouldn't be my preference to play Harris wide though. And obviously he's got TGH, who can play absolutely anywhere, bar goalkeeper. So he's got options. He just hasn't got natural fits for the position. And I do think Blues lost a little bit on the left-hand side against Orient. It wasn't particularly telling because obviously they're against 10 men and had the majority of the possession. But for example, a really good aspect of Blues play recently has been the long goal kick from Ryan Allsop. Looking for Laird primarily, but also looking for Keshi Anderson's pace down the left at times as well. So Blues have had 2 real flyers, one either side. And when Anderson doesn't play on the left, they don't have that. TGH is not that player. He's a very good player in different ways, but he's not, explosive in the way that Anderson and Laird are. Hansen has a little more speed. Again, just coming back from injury, will Chris Davies, knowing that he's his only fit and available winger, want to tread a little bit more carefully with him? I think he probably will. So I think it's just a case of muddling through. I don't think Blues will go into the free agent market now. The free agents list is made up of players who haven't been able to secure clubs up to this point. So I don't think they're going to be securing clubs now at this business end of the season. And Chris Davies, we know how he loves to trust a player. and kind of get them to buy into his way of thinking. Is he going to want to bring someone in with 2 months of the season to go to potentially play an important role? I don't think that's going to happen. That's going to be a hard sell either way, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. I think, Keshi's not long-term, is he?
No.
Hansen is back. I think there's just the squad stretches just about far enough to hopefully get Blues over this hump, and then we'll know more about what the situation with Jay is. The name I saw doing rounds on social media, I think last night, was Ryan Kent. Obviously, I think he's left. Was he Fenerbahce? And he's not played since September, October time. For the sake of what might only be 2 or 3 or 4 games, I just don't see the club going down that route. Watch them prove me wrong and flex that Rangers contact. Not that he's at Rangers anymore, and bring in Ryan Kent, but it doesn't feel like that's the avenue they're going to go down. Interesting thought though. Ty 1875 said start May every game from here on so he can find his deadly form again. Also, when was the last time he scored directly from a free kick?
Backer, I think. Was it?
Backer, yeah, okay. The one I remember was Gary Gardner against West Brom, but I think Backer scored since then, hasn't he?
Yeah, he scored against Stoke, didn't he, in the January?
Right.
So I think that is actually the last direct free kick goal Blues scored. I don't think there's many players in this current Blues squad that are that good at free kicks and scoring from those positions. Kieran Dowell is probably the one.
He hit the post the other week, didn't he?
Didn't he? Yeah. Peck's got a decent strike on him, but never actually seems to score with any of them. So, I think the weight might go on. I agree with the Alfie May point as well, though. I say I agree with it. I agree with it while Stansfield's injured. I'd be quite happy for Alfie May to have a run of games in the team, because I think he probably is the sort who'd thrive off that better than, being told that you've got this, 12 to 15 million pound striker to compete for a place with. I think Mays, as we saw at the start of the season, when he knows he's kind of the main man and he's going to play week in, week out, he does generally play better.
Indeed. Callum, opinions on Alsop? I think he's been magnificent and truly believe we don't need to replace him in the summer. I think I'm with Callum on that, actually. I wouldn't have too many issues at all if Blues started next season with Ryan Alsop as the number one. You?
No, I don't think I would, because the question mark, I suppose, was we knew how exceptional Ryan Alsop is with his feet when he joined, but is he a good enough goalkeeper to be the goalkeeper to carry Blues through? I think he's shown this season that he's a really good goalkeeper, not just at making those kind of reflex stops. And I think back to that double save against Stockport first from Barry was an exceptional save, and a follow up from Wootton. Your penalty saves against Charlton and Lincoln. The way he commands his area has actually surprised me. He's really, really commanding in the box. Way more so than Bailey Peacock-Farrell was when he was playing at the start of the season. I feel quite confident when Alsop's between the sticks and the crosses come in and the corners come in. I feel like he's going to deal with them. And he clearly gives the defence a lot of confidence. So, no, I agree. I wouldn't have any issues with Ryan Alsop starting next season as Blues number one. Yeah,
what I would throw into the mix is that the central defensive pairing have been outstanding. And the two players in front of the central defensive pairing, Peck and Iwata, are, clearly championship level midfielders. So the defensive structure is excellent. And I know Ryan Alsop is probably going to win the Golden Gloves quite handsomely. But, he's also the beneficiary of an excellent defensive setup and excellent defenders as well. But there's not a single red flag in my mind from what we've seen from Ryan Alsop. So, interesting point, Callum. Blues breakdown. Hi, Ben. The bitterness of social media gives us the weekly Blues aren't that good posts from the opposition fans. But in your experience, are the opposition press pack more respectful? I think most of the opposition press pack would have given the League One title to Blues before a ball was even kicked, wouldn't they?
Yeah, because they listen to the managers on a weekly basis say how much money Blues have got and how they've kind of bought the league. So
probably,
I think so. I do generally think that the kind of opposition press pack have been pretty respectful of Blues in that they have to be because they report on it, but also that they can appreciate the talent within the Blue squad. And and it is clearly exceptional for League One level, way better than a lot of these teams have faced before in League One. So there's been kind of almost that fear factor whenever Blues have gone to teams this season. They've always expected to lose. I remember when we before that Shrewsbury game when we had Ollie Westbury on the show, and weirdly enough, that is one of the games that Blues lost. But he wasn't giving Shrewsbury a prayer, was he, before that game? And that has generally been the feeling before Blues have played League One games this season. It won't be next season, to be fair, because there'll be 23 other Championship teams that will fancy a crack at Blues, and many of them will see themselves as equals to Blues. So be more interesting then. But yeah, generally, I think most people in League One who cover League One teams have seen Blues as a team that is just passing by.
Yeah, indeed. And it's not just about the talent and, the fact they spent 15 million quid on a striker or whatever they spent. Blues look like a different level team, don't they? Chris Davis has formed a team, and I think most journalists that I speak to recognise that passing through is the exact phrase. It's a good one. I'm wondering whether to out someone here, that someone you'll know associated with Shrewsbury, who bet me at the start of the season that Blues wouldn't go straight back up.
Do it, go on.
Should we out Joe Mazzy?
Yeah, go on.
Yeah. Okay.
He's not a listener, is he? So shout him.
I'd be surprised if he is. Yeah. So Joe, I shall be coming for you in a month or so. So not everyone at the start of the season was awarding the title to Blues. There were a couple of doubters, but I think money has spoken, and good football managers build good football teams. So that's interesting. Go on.
I was going to say, Brian, I was awarding the title to them after that West Brom friendly, and they spent around 20 million after that game. So
yeah, you moved into Wen territory very quickly, didn't you? That's right, you did. Tim Hawker on email. I think most Blue Noses would agree the squad is probably stronger than last season in the Championship, but not sure if there's more quality. Given our so I'm assuming that Tim's referring to depth rather than top-level quality there. Given our impending promotion, where do you think the team is in terms of Championship football, and where do you think we need to strengthen? Given our spending last year, will there be a budget for that? There's so much to unpack in there. Should we start there? And then Tim goes on to make a couple of other points as well. But thoughts about that and just transposing this team, this unstrengthened team, let's say it starts the season as it is now into Championship football.
I think this is a really interesting point. It's a conversation I've been starting to have with people because it's inevitable now that Blues are going to go back to the Championship. How many players, Brian, do Blues have to start games in the Championship? Go through the 11 and tell me the players you'd be quite happy with to see in a starting 11 opening day next season.
So we've just said Allsop, yes.
Yep.
Ethan Laird, obviously, yes. Yep. Clara, yes. Ben Davis, if it is Ben Davis, yes. If it's not, then Neumann, we don't know about Neumann, do we? But, we assume he's been brought in to play Championship level. So I do think Blues will have another Championship level centre-back playing next to Clara.
Yeah.
Alex Cochrane, I would say yes. Although I think you'd like to see a challenger, a bit of competition there, would you?
I would say yes. I was intrigued to see how the battle with Lee Buchanan went when Buchanan got himself fit, because he looked really good in those 2 or 3 games that he played around Christmas time. Just to give Cochrane a little bit of competition, because he's been unchallenged for the whole season, as he now pretty much. So I would like to see another good left back signed, because again, Buchanan with that knee injury, you expect him to be out until latter half of this year, don't you? So he's going to miss the first 3-4 months at least next season, you would presume. So I think Cochrane probably does need a strong competitor, like the centre-backs have got. Blues could go into the Championship next season with 4 very, very good centre-backs if Christian Bielik is still around as well, and God knows what happens with Grant Hanley. So they've got that depth there. I would say they probably also need a competitor for Alex Cochrane, but what he has shown this season, he's a really consistent, dependable defender, and I've been really impressed by him. So
we've named 5 players, and they're all there's 4 resounding yeses and a yes probably. Moving into midfield, obviously pecking away. I don't know that we necessarily need to extend that discussion.
No.
Backed up by Gardner Hickman and Mark Leonard. Love to see Mark Leonard play at a higher level when he's back fit again. Don't quite know how to sort of treat this question in terms of the attacking players. Let's say Jay when he's back fit, yes, obviously, because
Yep.
because you know he did it in the Championship. Thor, we've talked about a little bit. We both think that we thought Thor will, recover his form and be a decent player in the Championship. Let's say Keshi Anderson. Now, I would have had a question mark about Keshi Anderson, based on last year's Championship showing, but then you unearthed a stat that showed that basically Blues don't lose when Keshi Anderson plays, didn't you?
Yeah, even in the Championship, I think it was
Yeah.
12 starts, 12 starts, 5 wins, 5 draws, 2 defeats. Obviously, he played a lot under Eustace, and he played a lot the final 4 games under Rowett, didn't he, when Blues were unbeaten. So, yeah, I really like Keshi Anderson. I do think Blues need a very good player to compete with Keshi Anderson for that left wing spot. But Keshi Anderson would be an exceptional squad player in the Championship because he can play on both flanks. He can play number 10 when you need him as well, and he's a very, very intelligent footballer. I would 100% be quite confident going into games with Keshi Anderson in the Championship. I'd be inclined to sign Kieran Dowell as well. He's shown before when he's been at Norwich, and obviously all of his loan spells in the Championship from Everton, that he's very capable at that level and played in a Norwich team that dominate the Championship. So I'd be quite confident with him signing as well. I do think Blues have the makings of a very good Championship team. I think they just need maybe 3 or 4. 3 or 4, but these players have obviously got to be of real quality. And the beauty of Blues in the window this summer is that they haven't got to go and sign 17 players out there. They can go and sign 5 or 6, including 3 or 4 players that could potentially be starters to really strengthen their 11. I do think the 11 Blues have got now would probably be top 10 Championship. We saw, I'm not saying West Brom were at full strength or at their best in that final pre-season friendly, but Blues absolutely blew them away, and it's definitely a better Blues team now than that was back then.
Yeah, which basically I think it leaves us just looking at maybe depth or a bit of variety or some real X factor in the wide positions, but that's maybe about the only place. So we're looking at 8-9 starters at the moment, and I think it's also worth mentioning that this is a Richard Wilfordism as well, is that knowing who you are and what you're trying to achieve and what you're trying to do with the ball and in defence, having that sense of identity that counts for so much at the start of a season, when a lot of, let's say, half the division is trying to find itself and work out their best 11 and how best to skin their respective cats, then if that period extends to 7-8 games and Blues can rip off 15 points, then because they know who they are and their attacking patterns are grooved and they've got a manager who knows everything about every other team inside out, as they probably will, then yeah, I'm quite excited for it already, to be honest with you.
Brian, Ipswich are the holy grail, aren't they, for that, in terms of, they've gone from League One to the Championship, and by the, was it probably 15 games into last season, like you say, when a lot of teams are still kind of working themselves out and working out how they're going to play. Yeah. Ipswich had that clear idea and had already kind of marched to the top of the league with probably 8 or 9 point advantage on a lot of the teams underneath them, along with Leicester.
What I would say is I don't know that Blues have a Wes Burns or an Amari Hutchinson, who was so key to that Ipswich team last season, that real pace and attacking sort of brilliance in the wide positions. I think if they could get one of those, they can go on and kick on again.
No, I agree. We've said this in podcasts all season. When Blues do go to the Championship, a really speedy wide player of quality, would be an exceptional pickup. That's something they do need.
Indeed, which I think probably brings it all to a close. Or should we rip through Wycombe quickly?
Yeah, go on. That sounded a bit half-hearted there, Brian, for a top of the league.
Yeah, should we rip through this weekend's latest victory? Wycombe at home. Notable, I suppose, for the fact that Mike Dodds is in his first job as full-time number one. He's had a caretaker role at Sunderland previously, returning to Blues, where he was a key part of the academy that I suppose most famously brought through the Bellingham boys. That's significant from that point of view. It's not been plain sailing for Wycombe so far since Matt Bloomfield moved on, has it? What are your thoughts about this weekend's top 2 encounter?
So it's a very interesting one. I thought it would derailed them losing Bloomfield, but they've actually kind of maintained form-ish, probably because the teams, below them haven't, been setting the world alight either at the moment, and Blues have just gradually pulled away. But Wycombe have done okay. Mike Dodd's interested in his first actual managerial role. I know he had the Sunderland gig on an interim basis twice. I was quite surprised to see him kind of get a job of this magnitude, particularly when Wycombe are going for promotion, as his first proper job. But yeah, they're a good side. I remember them back in August. Kone is obviously massively important to them. Hasn't always played recently due to injuries. They've got a decent midfield, goal-scoring qualities in that midfield, and likes of Leahy. Sadly, who caused Blues all the issues back in that game in August, hasn't been fit for most of the season, so he could be key come the end of the season in the final stretch. Solid enough defensively, do tend to score a lot of goals away from home, although a few big victories early on have skewed that statistic a little bit. Having said all that, I back Blues to go and get 3 points and put down a marker this weekend. They were much better than Wycombe in that game back in August. Quite comfortable. I know Wycombe, ended 3-2, but Wycombe didn't really create an awful lot once Blues got to grips with the game and come back from the first goal. And Blues, as we've said a couple of times in this podcast today already, Blues have massively improved since August with the players they have. Even if certain players like Jay Stansfield might not necessarily be available, they are more than good enough to go and beat Wycombe.
The wins have sort of slowed to a trickle a little bit away from home lately. They drew at Cambridge, they drew at Crawley as well. In fact, they've drawn 4 of their last 5 games. I think one of them was in the Cup and they lost on penalties to Preston in that. 4 of their last 6 games. So it has slowed a little bit, and Wrexham are closing in a little bit, aren't they, on Wycombe? So it'll just be a case of how much energy Blues have got in the tank, because Wycombe haven't played this week. Can Davis piece together the coherent first team with all the injury problems? But obviously, Blues at home. I think there's only Burnley that, like Blues, haven't lost at home all season in the top 4 divisions so far. So you would expect them to win, but I do think it will be close. I think it will be quite tight.
I'm quite glad it is a game of this magnitude rather than a game against a mid-table or lower half team in League One, because I think given the number of games Blues have played recently, players must be tired. Obviously, Chris Davis can't do an awful lot to his 11 because of injuries. But you'd like to think that they play off the energy of the crowd and feed off the energy of the atmosphere in a game like this. So that gives me a little bit more confidence.
Yeah, indeed. If there is a banana skin just waiting around the corner, I wonder if that's at Bolton, next Tuesday, potentially, rather than Wycombe at home. So, yeah, brilliant. Right, thank you all for your interest. Thank you, Alex, for your time and thoughts again. Shaping up to be a very exciting few weeks. So it's from me and Alex, it's a keep right on from both of us.